So our next session, ladies and gentlemen, is Building Legacies That Last. And our next set of speakers have done exactly that. One has built an institution that has no parallel in public housing, anywhere in the world, I should add. And the other laying a legacy where quite literally, the sky is not the limit, it's just the beginning. I would like to introduce our respected speakers for this session in the order of their address. So first, Dr. Cheong Koon Hean is a celebrated urban planner who currently chairs both the Lee Kuan Yew Centre for Innovative Cities and Centre for Liveable Cities, while teaching as a professor of practice at SUTD. In her previous leadership, she has guided iconic redevelopment projects such as Marina Bay, but more importantly, managed Singapore's public housing portfolio while embedding sustainable and smart design. Dr. Cheong, I'd like to now invite you to give your address.
Good afternoon. Wow, you have sat there for very long. Normally, if I have a class, because I'm now in academia, I would say you may wish to stand up. Don't feel shy. It's hard to sit for so long. Now, I normally don't make speeches, but I tell a story. And it's usually a visual journey because I'm an architect. I speak through images. And I think what I'm about to share really needs to be done through images rather than my words. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Singapore story and really about our constraints and how our constraints became the catalyst for innovation. Well, this is Singapore, the little picture in the middle. We are a city-state and we're only about 730 square kilometers. What is that? It's actually about half the size of London and half the size of Delhi. It's actually very tiny, right? And it is a very small island with very big needs. We are not a city. We are a country. And that makes the constraints even harder because if we were a city, we didn't have to worry a lot. Things like military training, getting energy, water. But we have to do all these things within this very little red dot. Well, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew was our founding prime minister, and he said, when we first became independent, he said, we faced tremendous odds with an improbable chance of survival. Singapore was not a natural country, but man-made. Quite scary, when in 1965, when we became independent, and your founding prime minister tell you that, we really has an improbable chance of survival. It's quite scary, right? So, we are really a nation built from sheer will, vision, and careful planning. So what has helped us in this? How do we make this very, very difficult journey? Actually, I think many of you, I don't know how long you've been in Singapore. When I was growing up in the 50s, not 50s, the 60s, maybe I'm old but not that old, Singapore was really a nation of slums and squatters. That was how we were described. And it was congested, it was polluted, people had no housing. And today, we see this. So many people fly into Changi Airport and then they travel down and they say, oh, Singapore's rich, you don't have a problem. Really? That was our problem, right? So people forget. And unfortunately, sometimes our young people forget too. But how did we make this journey? I think we started by having clarity of objectives. The idea is not only to survive, but to thrive. And we're very clear, you need jobs, right? We need to make a living. So it's about a competitive economy. But we want to do it in a way that we give people a high quality of life and that this growth is sustainable to be environmentally responsible. So how do we do this? One very, very important part of our strategy is long-term planning. We eat, live, breathe long-term planning, which is forward-looking. We look at our plans very long-term, 30 to 40-year horizon, but it doesn't mean we only plan once in 30, 40 years. It's done every 5 years or 10 years. And it's cascaded down into multiple types of plans. I won't go into the detail because that's the only way that you have moved from plan to reality. Many cities have plans. I'm sure in India, you have so many cities, they all have plans. Question is, do you implement them, right? And so I think I want to say that long-term planning is important because it makes sure we safeguard enough land for our future. And it balances the trade-offs between economic growth, social needs, and equity. And it also prioritizes infrastructure investments. And don't worry about the diagram. This is just to impress on you how complicated it is. Right? But the point is that a lot of people are involved in the planning, and you really need very competent institutions and people. And policy is only as good as implementation. You can draft lots of papers, but if they don't get implemented, forget it. Nothing's going to happen, right? So it's an exercise of bringing a lot of people together in that coordinated and integrated way in a whole of government effort. I'm just going to touch on some of the constraints and share with you some urban innovations that I've picked up, which I thought might be quite interesting. By the way, how many of you have lived in Singapore for 2 years? Oh, quite a lot. 4 years. 5 years. Oh, not bad. 10 years and beyond. Wow, you're all Singaporean. Okay, great. All right. One of the strategies is really about how do you make this very dense, small place livable? It's about integrating blue and green living. What does that mean? We started off as a garden city. You know, even when we went very poor, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew said we need to be a garden city. Hard to believe, right? When we're so poor, thought of building a garden. And then we moved on to a concept of being city in a garden, and now it's about city nature as this greenery continued to thrive. And so actually in Singapore, you have many parks. And these parks are for respite, for play, for wellness. And there's several hundred of parks in Singapore. And by 2030, every household will be within a 10-minute walk to a park. And then, you know, urban planners need to be magicians. How do I create the sense of space for all of you? Well, you do that, for example, through this concept of the park connectors, by linking the parks where you can walk and jog. I think some of you must have used it too, right, for exercise. One park is very small, but if you link 100 parks, it's a lot of walking that you can do, right? And we have also introduced nature ways, whereby we even use roads. And the way we plant along roads and linear green to connect the little forests that we have to increase biodiversity. And you see this even when you have Bukit Timah Expressway, we built eco-link bridges across, very well planted for the animals to cross, not for us, it's for the animals, right? So that they have more space to roam around. Now, I think some of you might have gone to the rail corridor. Anyone has walked the rail corridor? Oh, good. If not, that's your homework for next weekend. Or tomorrow. You can go tomorrow, right? So, linear ideas are very, very good. All right? It's a device that urban planners use to create distance, right? And we have 3 little hill parks at Mount Faber and Kent, but on their own, they're very tiny. So what we did was we built iconic bridges to link them. And now you can really do the entire Kent walk. How many of you have done this? Wow, you're such a great audience. Thank you. You're very encouraging for me, you know, because I worked so hard to make this happen and you're using it. So that's the best encouragement for us. Not me, but all my colleagues. So integrating green and blue, an obvious case is, of course, Marina Bay. Just look at that image, right? There's green and blue, and there's a very dense city. And because of the way we plant, we start to have our furry friends come back, right? The otters. I know they all used to be very cute, but soon they're a bit of a nuisance. You see the guy biting off the head of the fish, and then he would just throw the fish back into the water. Now that is another problem. Human-wildlife nature conflicts that we have to manage. And we do this even for HDB. This is in Bidadari, one of the newest towns. I love this one because we work very hard at planning this well. We have a lake, we collect it as storm water. There's a freshwater reservoir under the park. And we safeguarded all the trees, the mature trees, so that when the residents move in, all the birds came back. So Singapore is not, Changi Airport is not just a hub for human beings. Singapore is actually a hub for migratory birds, even though we're so dense. But as you build, you begin to remove all the trees, beautiful trees from the ground. What do? We start to propose putting them into the sky as skyrise gardens. So there are incentives for developers to actually replace all the greenery lost in the ground on the footprint of building on skywards. And soon you have designs like this, right? I think you all know some of these. This is Park Royal Hotel by Woha. This is by CapitaLand, Capital Spring. And this is Pan Pacific. I don't know how many of you have gone there. Beautifully designed. And that captures the entire idea, right? Bringing greenery into the sky. And it doesn't only happen in private developments, but it also happens in public towns, HDB towns, right? This is Dawson, and this is at Punggol. I love this project. You go there now, it's a lot lusher than this picture that I show you. And so, surprisingly, being one of the most dense cities in the world, this is a study done by MIT Sensible Lab. It has shown that Singapore has the highest density of greenery, all right, based on the comparison of tree canopy. But of course, it's also about transportation strategies. We adopt this thing called transit-oriented and car-light, meaning we try to do polycenters where we put in very dense developments, mostly your new towns, especially your town centers and regional centers, but they must be very well served by public transport, because that's the only way we can get you off the car. It's a real challenge, right? People still drive, but imagine if we didn't have a good public transport system, it would have been worse, and that reduces congestion. So we have our draconian congestion pricing, which we're all equal misery, but we still drive, huh? And we introduce AVs and EVs. This is to reduce emissions, and AVs are actually going to be far more efficient than individual drivers, and cycling and pedestrian networks, hopefully to get us out of the car and walk and cycle. But it is a beautiful city. It's also about treasuring heritage and memories. So for a very small place, we have conserved more than 7,000 over buildings and structures, and some of them in districts. But it's not only the old buildings, it's about very special places close to our hearts. And the URA identified these identity places and tried to safeguard them, the type of users, the scale of the place. But it's also creating very beautiful spaces in the city. It can be under the viaduct, it can be in your back lanes, and little pocket parks in the city that make the city very livable. And so when we did Marina Bay, there was actually a lot of work in shaping the city through urban design guidelines. I have to speed up. I realize I don't have a lot of time. So we create very nice places where you can make great places where people can go there and enjoy. And therefore, you have spaces like this, right? National Day. I don't know how many of you watch, but some of you would have been there, some watch on television. But it's also about creating and optimizing resources. We have tried reclaiming land to get more land. The polder, which was on the front page of the news when Prime Minister Lawrence Wong went to visit, we tried floating spaces and underground caverns. And even the way we reclaim for future coastal protection, you can use it for coastal protection, collect water for reservoirs, and you can create land for development. Yeah, because if you don't see it, thank you, yeah, because I look at the counter. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah. And so it's also about multifunctional uses of spaces. Because if you cleverly optimize the space, you can have layers, like a cake, right? And I call this a 1-minute city. This is a very interesting public housing, little neighborhood center that has been extremely successful, where it is greenery, there's community spaces, there's a medical center, there's a small units of housing for people who want to retire, and there's a childcare center, and there's cross-programming so that the older and the younger people can mix together and enjoy each other's company. But those are the nice things, right? Now we talk about the existential issues. Water. As you know, we have to buy water from Malaysia. And this was a legacy from the British who safeguarded an agreement. But we would appreciate that over time, especially with climate change, it's very hard to rely on getting water from a neighbor because they also need it, because even Malaysia has droughts, right? So we had to find other ways. So there are three other ways. One is domestic source, new water, and desalinated water. So domestic source means that you pray very hard and it rains. But fortunately, we are in the tropics, right? Look at the beautiful rain today. But we need to collect this water and have an efficient way of doing it. So Singapore is covered a whole network of drains and at the same time a lot of parks that soak up the water. We want to be a sponge city. Actually, a lot of cities suffer from not having enough water. It's not because they don't have enough rain, but it's because they cannot collect it efficiently. And a lot of it is just lost to the rivers and the sea. But they have water, right? So we collect every drop. And the aim is actually to increase our catchment to 90% of land area. Everything that falls, we collect. But when we collect, we need a lot of reservoirs. So the other way is we have started to naturalize our canals. So from this in Bishan, it becomes a naturalized river. And when it rains, it becomes a floodplain. There's nothing wrong with this. This is what it should do. Collect the water, all right? So don't call PUB and complain. This is what it should do. And you get this, right? Beautiful stream, but when a heavy rain, the water will rise and becomes a floodplain for collecting and slowing down water to prevent floods. But then the water is then channeled later to the reservoirs. Remember, we collect everything. So Marina Bay, when we put the barrage, it has become one of the largest inland freshwater reservoirs in the world. All right? So, as I say, collect everything, right? Collect everything. Now, when we collect everything, we also, of course, do desalinated water. But again, multifunctionality users. I don't know how many of you live in the east. You might have gone here. There's a huge pump room underneath, and there's a huge desalination plant. But on top, you can jog. You can fly a kite, it's recreational space. Now, as I say, we collect every drop of water. So later when you go to the loo and you flush, we collect that too, all right? But we need the technology to do it. So the deep tunnel sewage system, we're into phase 2 now, is actually a tunnel that is what we call a massive superhighway for conveying used water. It's 15 stories underneath our feet. And it collects by gravity for everything, industrial water, everything you flush, everything you wash, and it's transported to water reclamation plants, which is underground. And of course, we then have new water. Have you drunk new water? It's actually very clean. It's so clean that PUB has to put the minerals back. But actually, most of it go to industry, surprisingly, because wafer fab plants need a lot of very, very clean water. Okay, if you haven't drunk new water, go to the supermarket. PUB has created a new beer, all right, called New Brew. So you can try that, the beer. It's made from new water, all right? Okay, but then it presents an energy problem, right? And we don't have energy. So I think we strengthen the wastewater nexus by combining the two. You have, because in Singapore we incinerate all our waste because we don't have places to dump the rubbish. There's only one, right? But it generates heat, and the heat drives the water reclamation plant. But when you do water reclamation, sludge is left behind. The sludge is then in turn burnt, creates heat, and this cycle creates a virtuous cycle. That's what we need to move towards to minimize our energy use. And of course, housing. I need to touch on housing because I think that was what the organizers requested. I'll do it very quickly. Usually it's a much longer explanation. Well, why do we... We're quite obsessed with providing affordable housing for people, and it really stems from a compact between the government, when we became independent, and the people. And Mr. Lee Kuan Yew at that time said that the primary preoccupation was to give every citizen a stake in the country and its future. So in Singapore, public housing is majority owned. It's not rented like most other places. And that's the social compact. When we became a nation, I mean, India has a rich history of thousands of years. We don't. And if you tell people to go and do national service, why would they do a national service for you when you are all migrants, coming to Singapore? So they needed to have a piece of this land, you see, this place in Singapore. So today, public housing houses 80% of the population in over 1 million flats, and actually only 6% are rental, all right, for the very poor who cannot afford. So very, very quickly, how to make it affordable, we provide a whole range of options for different budgets and needs. And we price them below market, all right, by giving market discounts and grants. And this is a selling price, although the market value is that high, all right? And, but you see, it's not about just government giving you subsidies. No government in the world can give you enough subsidies. You have to help people to pay. So we do this through the Central Provident Fund, right? All of us who work, we get about 37% in our CPF, of which 23% can be used for housing. So if HDB prices housing at about 25, 23% of your income, right, you should be able to pay. And actually 80% of my buyers pay nothing every month. It's all from the CPF. So, and that's how we make housing affordable, all right? But if you choose to buy bigger homes because your parents give you money, or your savings, good for you, then maybe you pay a few $100s more, all right? And this is the comparison of the price to income ratio. So these are all the global cities in the world. So although we are so small compared to many of these countries like Vancouver, plenty of land and all that, but the price to income ratio is actually low relatively because we have public housing. So it is affordable, right? All right, very quickly, housing is just not only about housing in Singapore. I'll just run through this quickly. It's also about building communities. So the way you design public housing here is that we share everything, right? Share spaces, share facilities, we mix all the housing types. We don't have a rich quarter, we don't have a poor quarter, and now we even mix the sole units and the rental units in the same block. And I just want to mention the software. We had racial riots after we became independent in 1965. So public housing, we want to make sure that we don't have enclaves, all right? If you come from India, because of shared culture, come from the same hometown, tendencies to live in the same place. Come from China, it's the same thing, right? My ancestors did the same thing. But we try to use the public housing and we set ethnic quotas for each housing estate that will reflect exactly the national demographic quota, that national demographic mix. So I grew up with people, my neighbors could be Chinese, they could be Indians, they could be Malays, we go to the same schools, we eat at same hawker centers, and I think that has helped a lot in the idea of social cohesion. And finally, of course, we have a lot of programming and outreach and to try to get people to interact, all right, on the ground. So there's a lot in this, but I won't go into detail, but just to give you a flavor of it. And of course, supporting aging, we encourage our younger people to live with the parents. But do you think they want to live with the parents? No, right? But we say, okay, we'll give you a bit of incentive to live near your parents, all right? We give you priority, we give you a discount, and a lot of mutual care and support. And I don't have a lot of time to say this, but if you want, you can ask me some questions and I'll try and explain. It is also about using the public housing to monetize for your retirement. How do you do that, right? So public housing is not just a roof over your head. It's a mechanism to help you to have some income for retirement as well. I won't go into the details, but if you'd like to know more, I can explain. And creating elderly-friendly environments. We try to upgrade your home. And we also build flats that people could right-size to. When you're older, you don't want such a big flat. So you can buy a smaller, affordable housing, and you sell the flat, you have plenty of money, you put it back in the CPF, gives you an annuity for life, right? So in Singapore, I think all of you who have CPF, you will know you are covered by insurance, you're covered for housing, right? And you can buy an annuity, it covers you forever, and you're having paid off your flat, you have a roof over your head. pretty good formula, right? Okay. And okay, housing is very well planned, all right? It's a live, work, play environment and learn. And these are the type of environments you get, and these are the type of homes that you get, and people are very creative. We don't want cookie cutter. People are very creative in doing up their homes, and we upgrade your homes all the time. Inside, in the neighborhood, outside, the whole town. And of course, the big challenge is when the 99-year lease is up. Okay, you can ask questions later, but I think my minister, Chee Hong Tat, has already touched on this. Probably I don't have all the answers because they're working through the dynamics of how this is going to take place. All right? So again, it's about innovating all the time, developing sustainable development. We introduce smart housing technologies into public housing. You can tap into smart technologies, biophilic developments, and going forward, the focus is on wellness. And Singapore, of course, the government does a lot of consultation with the public, such that Klaus Schwab, I think we know him from the founder of the World Economic Forum, has actually called Singapore a model of stakeholder government. So it's done together with the citizens, the planning. And so what made all this possible? This is my last slide, okay? It's about really visionary leadership, clean government, very important, and good urban governance, leaders who are very citizen-centric. This is so hard in the world of politics today, right? And not just the leaders, but also the government, the civil servants, has to be citizen-centric. But Singapore, we are supported by strong institutions. We built up institutions over time, put in competent people, and take a whole-of-government approach to get things done, and a culture of foresight. Don't wait for things to happen, because it probably will be too late. All the new challenges that cities face, climate change, you cannot solve it overnight. And you have to invest way ahead, right? And investing in very expensive infrastructure, which most probably we don't have the money today. So you have to create the financing and you have to plan ahead. So the Long Island example that I show is something that will be planned ahead, at least 20 years ahead, right? A culture of foresight. And of course, innovate, innovate, innovate. So we have only a very little red dot, but we try to make it the best home and the best place to make a living. So thank you very much. I've exceeded your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cheong. You can take a seat back in the audience. We'll get you back again on the podium for the Q&A. So usually, when we travel overseas, people ask about Singapore. All they know is only Singapore Airlines, Changi Airport, DBS Bank. Now we've got several other points to talk about. Our next speaker is also India's own rocket man. He has been the 8th chairman of ISRO, India's National Space Agency, and a leading scientist himself. Over a career of more than 40 years, he has helped power landmark missions and spun a lot of yarns: Chandrayaan, Mangalyaan, and soon Gaganyaan. Today, he will talk about his experience in creating a legacy or building a one for the future. I would like to now invite the AS Kiran Kumar on podium to give his address. Thank you.
Good afternoon to all of you. At the outset, I should thank the organizers for giving me an opportunity to be here amongst you and share the story of how ISRO has done its work over the last many decades. Probably just after this brilliant presentation of how Singapore has grown from 60s, what I would like to do is just take you how India built its space program from a point when in 1957, humanity got a new technological capability, a disruptive technology of going to space. Russia put its first object into space, Sputnik, and at that time, it was America and Russia who were competing with each other to demonstrate who is more powerful, who is more mightier. And we had, as you are aware, 57 is just 10 years into independence, after many hundreds of years external rule, a country struggling to provide food, shelter, and education to its citizens. At that time, a great visionary scientist like Dr. Vikram Sarabhai, Homi Bhabha, etc., they were looking at how this technological capability of going beyond Earth can make a difference to the country like India, which was struggling to provide various facilities to its citizens. What Dr. Sarabhai did was, he got his friends across America, France, Russia, and Germany to provide sounding rockets in the form of kits, got it assembled in Tumba. Tumba is the place near Trivandrum, where for even doing this activity, he had to convince the fishermen in that region with the help of a priest, telling them, you allow us to conduct these experiments, one day the country will benefit. And for that also, to tell the international community that we have a unique geomagnetic equator at that place, and if you conduct upper atmospheric research, it is beneficial for the humanity. And with that, the activity started, and as though what he had promised to the fishermen became a reality, 1999 onwards, what India did was, by looking at the color of the ocean from orbiting satellites, identify the chlorophyll, through that the food chain of the fish, and then tell the fishermen, we have almost 11,500 kilometer long coastline, and lakhs of fishermen surviving on for their livelihood by catching fish. So a center in Hyderabad, Indian National Center for Ocean Information System, started providing the specific information to the fishermen where they can go for catching the fish. And this alone saves to the country between 10 to 15,000 crores a year, because the fisherman doesn't have to now spend extra fuel, petrol or diesel. And to this, with our recent Navig constellation, we added a new capability where a small battery-operated gadget can be fitted into the boat of the fisherman. And you can also visualize when the fisherman is into the ocean few kilometers, no terrestrial tower can reach him. But a mobile in his hands communicates with this gadget, and with our Navig satellite and the prospective fishing zone information, an app in the mobile points to the fisherman where he has to go for fishing in a video compass mode, and also in his mother tongue gives him alerts about weather vagaries that could occur, whether it's going to be heavy rain, winds or cyclonic storm, or even sea state roughness being unbearable. So you can see here a technology of building rockets, satellites, and application is enabling a person who does not know reading or writing carry on his livelihood. In a very similar manner, in the initial days, ISRO also did one more very interesting thing. In actually 1975, we are celebrating 50 years of that event. It is called a satellite instructional television experiment. What was done is, Dr. Sarabhai had convinced Americans that they should allow us to borrow one of their most advanced technology satellite called ATSF. And if you look at that, that satellite had a lifetime of 2 years, and they were convinced that they should allow us to use it for 1 year. And then what was done in 1975, the satellite built by Americans were moved over to the Indian longitude, and for 1 year, India conducted an experiment called Satellite Instructional Television Experiment, where in 2,400 remote villages of our country, with what we are all very familiar today, direct-to-home television, which has a 1/4 meter antenna on your rooftop or a set-top box. With that, you are able to see the television program. But you imagine in 1975, only 4 metros in India had the privilege of looking at broadcasting. And at that time, ISRO demonstrated to the country that the space technology is the way to go for this. And by conducting this in 1975 for 1 year, it was demonstrated to the powers that be that what they spoke in Delhi can be heard all over the country. And you can imagine it doesn't require much more convincing for the government to approve the program. So India started its INSAT program, where it built its own satellites for providing broadcasting, communication, and also weather monitoring. You're also very familiar that in the earlier decades, when super cyclones used to strike the coastal region, tens of thousands of people used to lose their lives. But today, with the satellite-based observation, you can predict exactly where and when a cyclone comes. And with that, the disaster relief agencies are able to evacuate them and save their lives. And in the recent past, the loss of life has come down to single digits. And that too, because many of them do not listen to the advice. But otherwise, so today, with the help of satellites, you are able to make observation. And you can also see a satellite orbiting in space can look at the India and its subcontinents. And today you have enough sensors which can look at both in optical and infrared. Many times we wonder, between June to September, we have got this monsoon season, what can anybody see from space? But then, like glass is transparent to us for our visible light, microwaves can penetrate through the cloud, and sensors put on these satellites can make observations. And also using this, we have built a weather forecasting community, and who are getting all this information and improving the forecast, etc. And then starting from, like I said, in Tumba, in the 60s, the first sounding rocket was put into place on 23rd of November in 1963. From then, gradually building a capability of your own launch vehicle, first with a small satellite launch vehicle, SLV, then PSLV, GSLV. Of course, when we came to GSLV, while one superpower was ready to give the technology, other superpower ensured that that did not happen. And in a way, it gave us the opportunity to build our own cryogenic engines. And today we have more than 4 versions of that, with which we are now gearing up for building our Gaganyaan program, where these rockets will take the people to go beyond Earth. And then in a similar manner, the India started using its technology of space, building rockets, satellites, and its application. And in fact, India is the only country which started its space program for non-military purposes. And everybody else had started for a military application. And of course, as I said, when we started our journey, we were way down in the economic ladder. But today, as you keep increasing your ability, you come to the fourth, and then you are looking at by 2047, you want to be among the top and equal. Then the need also changes. India can no longer afford to ignore the capability of using space technology for other applications, because we have such friendly neighbors that you need to manage a lot of things. So today, for example, when the Kargil happened, we had to build a capability of looking at very high resolution imaging system. And all these times, we had been building innovative technological capabilities. As you are also familiar, that the satellite technology or the launch vehicle technology being dual use, the information is not easily accessible, and you have to build many things on your own. And what is accessible you use, and what is not accessible you build. That's how ISRO started building its capability, starting from, like I said, sounding rockets as a form of do-it-yourself kit. But today, we have built a capability where we have launched not only our own satellites, but more than 400 plus satellites of 34 countries. And among them, when in 2017 we launched 104 satellites in one go, it was a world record at that point of time. It was done not with the purpose of doing the record, but gaining some monetary advantage, because in the launch vehicle we had enough space to put. And at the time, when small satellite builders were finding it difficult to find their journey to space, it is like putting an envelope in a truck. So they had to wait for other people to support them. So when we were building this particular launch vehicle for launching, there was companies which were looking for putting their large number, and that's how it was used. While all these capabilities are being built, India made sure that the ability to go to space and using the orbital systems, you can cover broadcasting, communication, weather monitoring, and not only that, remote sensing on Earth. identifying where to drill a borewell in the country. More than 4 lakh borewells were drilled using the information generated from space. Similarly, you can use it for telling the government ahead of harvesting what is going to be the yield of the major crops. And today, like I said, we also need to generate a lot of information on what is happening globally. And for all this, the capabilities were built. And all this was done starting from practically no capability, and at that time when information is also not easily accessible as we have today with internet, etc. Much of the work had to be done by, in a way, hard learning by your own skills and capability. And here is where India took a very different approach. And for this, we really need to appreciate the capabilities of the leaders who originated this program. Like I said, Dr. Vikram Sarabhai, one of the things I remember he had said when he was required to actually run Ahmedabad Textile Industrial Research Association, ATIRA, he had put an advertisement in the paper saying, people with experience need not apply. It looks so counterintuitive. You imagine this is in the 60s. But then we are all very familiar. When you want to solve problems, you need people who can look at the problem afresh and not be bogged down by thought processes or experiences of their earlier things, because new problems require new ways of looking at solutions. And that's how Dr. Sarabhai built an organization where he gave challenges to multiple groups to start with. And then he was followed by Professor Satish Dhawan, who actually put in place what we can call as ISRO culture today. One of the key things he had done was ensure that the people who are going to run the programs, for example, project management, etc., while they are given freedom to run their programs, they are subjected to intensive scrutiny by bringing in people from academic and other institutions and peers, and then subject them to severe questioning of their project, but then not restrict them while running. So they were given the freedom, because obviously if you have to complete a project on time, you cannot be all the time subjected to scrutiny outside. While initially it happens, they were allowed to perform their task as long as they can demonstrate what they are building can stand the test of the tests that are performed. And with that freedom, while the managers understood that though they have not come up with the optimal solution for that particular project, but for a future project, they will work on that and then build. And this is how, actually, in Satish Dhawan, built in a way the actual, you can say what you can call a process-driven system. And then beyond leaders and beyond visionary leaders, things went on continuing to happen. And then another very important aspect is how you have to keep innovating. What India did right from the beginning was it made use of all the opportunities it got. For example, in the early 70s, Russians told that we will support you for a couple of launches. So the first Aryabhata was launched in 1975 with Russian support. And then at that time, we started building 2 remote sensing satellites, Bhaskara 1 and 2. But then, similarly, when Ariane was building their new rocket, they said, we have a place for putting a satellite in that. So India took that opportunity, built its first 3-axis stabilized communication satellite, and then put it into orbit. And then initially, like I said, our INSAT series, since at that time we did not have the capability, we made use of an American company to build the first generation. But then subsequently, all we built on our own. And today we have a host of more than 60 plus satellites providing various capabilities. So while all this was also happening, it is very important to realize in science and technology, the things change very rapidly. So unless you are competent, you build and increase your competence, you cannot survive. So what India started doing was going beyond, for example, our 36,000 kilometer geostationary orbit to go to places like Moon and Mars. Why was it necessary? It was necessary because if you have to keep the challenge, enable the people to solve much greater problems, you have to challenge them. So what India challenged its scientists and engineers, how to go to Moon, which is still like 80,000 kilometers. And here again, you can see though man had landed on the moon by 1969 and large number of probes had touched the surface of the moon, when India did its program in 2008, the credit for that particular satellite is it discovered the presence of water molecule and process of water molecule formation on moon was discovered by this satellite in 2008, which also goes to show that in science and technology it is never too late. You can do things which others have not done if you can innovatively do your work. And similarly, when India did its Mars program, the task cut out for the satellite, which was launched on the 5th of November 2013, travel a distance of 600 million kilometers over 10 months. And at the end of that period, you imagine a cube in space of 50 kilometers. So this satellite had to be inside that after traveling 10 months and 600 million kilometers to the second on 24th of September 2014 morning 7:30 a.m. To the second, the satellite had to be inside that cube. Otherwise, it would not have been possible for us to put it into the Mars orbit. And again, when India achieved this, India became the first country in the world in its maiden attempt to succeed in an event like that. And in a similar manner, when on 23rd of August 2023, we landed our Chandrayaan-3 lander and rover on the moon, the task that was there was very difficult. You can imagine, initially in Chandrayaan-2, we were attempting to build a system where till that time, all the rocket engines we had built had a capability of working. Once you start operating it, it delivers a fixed force. But when you want to touch down on a planetary body, you need throttling capability. So we were building engines for the first time with such capability. So there were some shortcomings. And in Chandrayaan-2, we came very close to landing, but we failed. And then, of course, what we learned from Chandrayaan-2 with an orbiter, which is generating images. In fact, you will be happy to know, even today, the best orbiting camera for moon is carried by our Chandrayaan-2, the high-resolution imaging system, which produces something like 28 centimeter images. And it was with the capability of this image that we could succeed in landing on the 23rd of August in Chandrayaan-3. Because in Chandrayaan-2, we had identified an area of 500 meters by 500 meters for touchdown. But using our own data during the intervening period, we identified an area of 2 kilometer by 4 kilometer. And within that, any 100-meter area, you can safely touch down because the 4 legs of the lander will not hit a boulder or get into a crater. So all this was done. So in a way, you can see what India has done, started making use of space technology for delivering solutions to the problem, whether it is for communication, broadcasting, weather monitoring, or even for farmers, for precision agriculture, and for strategic applications, which is becoming a necessity. And today, space is becoming the 4th frontier, where already you have seen space tourism, space adventure, space exploitation, and going to other planetary bodies. India has already decided that it will have its own humans going into space in the next couple of years. And by 2035, we will have our own space station. And by 2040, we will have Indians landing on the moon and coming back. So work is progressing in all this. And the amount of work that needs to be done is quite enormous. Because till you are putting only machines into space, the kind of risk you can take is much more. But one life starts have to be put, then the kind of risk you can take is very limited. So you have to build very robust systems. So that's what is going on right now. And as a country also, since space economy is a $1 trillion economy, government is enabling the country to be a significant player in the space economy by enabling a huge amount of entrepreneurs and academic institutions to participate by bringing in nationals, for example, NSIL, New Space India Limited, and also InSpace as a body for supporting and promoting entrepreneurs. Actually, very soon you will see a private companies having their own launchers, and they're building 3D printed engines, which is actually being done for the first time. And then you also have a constellation of 12 satellites being put into orbit by private entities. So in a way, what India has done over this 6 decades period is starting in an activity of going beyond Earth, using space for the benefit of the country, and progressively enabling its own entrepreneurs to participate and take India towards what it is aiming for by 2047, becoming a Vikasit Bharat, and in this process, enabling the country to move ahead. So I'll stop here. Thank you very much for the patient hearing.
Just take a seat. So thank you, Dr. Kiran Kumar. That was really quite a bit of new information. Among the many institutions that Vikram Sarabhai built was also IIM Ahmedabad. May I now invite Dr. Cheong back on stage, along with the moderator for the session, Varun Raghavan, an entrepreneur and CEO of the Princeton Digital Group, and a pioneer in creating a digital legacy of sorts. So Varun, this is the last session before the coffee break, so you'll take us to the Q&A before we break for coffee.
Thanks, Rahul. Professor Koon Hean and Dr. A.S. Ravi Kumar, it was great to have your presentations, and it was very interesting to hear what you had to say. As you were speaking, you said that you would want to share a little bit more about monetization. I think it was quite interesting for us as well. So do you want to take the opportunity to talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah. I'm just wondering how many of you here live in HDB flats? Okay, good. So they should be quite interested. Huh? Yeah, the public housing is really not just about the housing. It is actually a very clever design of social policy. So as I've said, first, through the government helping people to buy the home, they own the home. That's very important. Why is it important? Because you have the right to sell it and you keep the money. The government takes nothing back, right? So what happens is that, let's say, how do you monetize the home? Let's say, you see, our flats are 99-year leases. They're not freehold for a very good reason, right? Because you need to recycle the land for the next generation. So let's say you have lived in it for a number of years, 29 years, you have 70 years of lease left on your home. When you retire and your children leaves and buy their own home, for example, there are many ways to monetize. One is, of course, to rent out some of the rooms in the home, because usually it's a 3-room bedroom. One is you could sell it and buy a smaller apartment. Now, when you sell and buy a smaller flat, you would have money remaining. That money, a portion of it has to go back into the Central Provident Fund, the CPF. And when it goes back into the CPF, people can buy an annuity with that money. So when you buy that smaller home, we require you to fully pay for it from the proceeds of the larger flat, so that you don't have a mortgage hanging over you, especially when you are elderly. You don't want to have to pay a mortgage, right? So you now have an annuity that pays you an income all the time, and you have this fully paid home, which is a smaller flat. Now, what if you don't want to sell your flat? And you don't want to rent it out. You want your privacy and you don't want to sell your flat because your grandchildren come home, or you like your neighbors, right? Or you need a bit more space. So what we've done is, from the 99-year lease, remember, let's say you've lived in it for 29 years, there's 70 years left on the lease, you can choose to sell a portion of the lease back to the government. So let's say you sell 30 to 40 years of the lease back to the government, you get a sum of money, but we will make sure that the remaining lease must cover you till you're 95 years old. We don't want a situation where your lease runs out and we're still alive. Okay, you may say, but I live to be 100. I think there will be a new policy to cover that. Should you live to 100? Because I do know people now live to their 90s, right? But we think 95, based on general statistics, is more than enough. So again, after you sell back some of the lease, you get the money, put it back into the CPF, and you get an annuity for life. So you are now living in exactly the same home which you have already paid off, but you get an annuity for life. And so that's how you monetize the flat, the public housing flat.
Thank you. Interesting that Singapore is apocryphally considered to be one of the blue zones where people live for more than 100 years. Seems like that could be a problem, so good to hear.
We'll have to adjust the policy. We'll probably say till 100 or something.
Thank you. Dr. Kumar, thank you for sharing the story of India's space journey. And many of us Indians, and I grew up in India, we take our space eminence for granted as a country, and we always believe that we would be good at it. How do you see this evolving in the future? Where do you think India has both opportunities and risks in continuing to be as strong in this area as we have been so far?
See, this is where actually the government realizes that if only the government has to run the space activity, the ability to not only to make use of in the space economy, but also remain relevant in the global situation. And as always, the human tendency, after conquering land, ocean, airspace, he is now looking at to conquer space also. So if you have to be relevant, you also have to be competent. And if you have to be competent, you have to keep constantly building your skill sets, etc. I just want to bring one point, a narrative here. See, like I said, we did our first site experiment borrowing an American satellite. On the 30th of August, 30th of July of this year, we launched a satellite called NISR, NASA ISRO Synthetic Aperture Radar. See, America was ready to do a common collaborative mission with us only after we built Chandrayaan-1 and many radars of our own. And this satellite itself, if you look at, is a hugely capable satellite, which is going to provide like monitoring, like health monitoring of the Earth. Like you measure your heart rate, pulse rate, etc. Every 12 days, it covers the entire globe in a very highly sophisticated set of parameters. But the point is, they were ready to work with us only after you demonstrated your capability. So like what you're asking, if India doesn't remain competent and build its capability to remain relevant in space arena, then you are going to face another round of colonization of a different kind. So you really do not have an option. If you want to be relevant and at the top, you need to build competencies in the most advanced technology areas. So there is no real choice there.
Got it. Thank you. There was a question here which I think is very interesting, so I'm going to read it out. It's from Subra, which says, why is it such a huge challenge to send humans to moon when it was done successfully as long back in 1969?
Yeah, okay. Only as you can visualize, when you are doing something for the first time, and if the country is ready to spend whatever money it takes to do it, because at that time it was a competition between two countries, and America could not afford Russians doing the first man, first dog, first woman, everything getting into space. So they had to show that they were capable. So they spent a huge amount of money. But as you keep growing, it's not just the ability to do things, but ability to do it economically that becomes more and more problematic. That is one side. Second side is, if you not do certain thing for a long time, you also lose a lot of information. So you have to build certain things all afresh. That's where, for example, Russians also were trying to do, just when we were landing on 23rd August, few days earlier, they were trying to send one but failed. Because again, the problem is they were attempting after a long time. So it's always a challenge. You have to not only keep building, but also you have to keep retaining the capability. So that's the difficulty of doing many things coming ahead.
And to your point, for India, there are many moonshots which are higher priority than the actual literal moonshot.
Yeah, that's correct. Because always, if you see what the government was spending on ISRO was, if you take as a percentage of the budget, it does not change from the early 60s. But only because of its economic growth, it's able to put little more. But then now it is enabling the private entities to be a significant player. Like human beings are now more entrepreneuring. You are seeing private entities giving you probably space hotels, and then maybe you can land on moon for a honeymoon, etc.
Thank you. Professor Koon Hean, there was a question here about how did Singapore pay for its transformation from a city of, was it slums and, what did you use the term?
Slums and squatters.
Slums and squatters to what it is today. How did the economic logic work?
Yeah, I think that's a very important question. And it's really not about the technical ability to build, right? It's where's the money coming from. So you somehow have to find a way where your money flows in a circular manner. So when Singapore first became independent, we didn't have very much. And the city was actually full of slums and squatters. But what we did have is we had some land left over from the British. So that's one. That's an asset, right? And the second thing is that we do have a Land Acquisition Act. Actually, many countries have a Land Acquisition Act. The question is whether politically there's the will to actually do it. I'm sure India has it because we came from the British system, right? Our planning systems and laws and regulations. So the government had to acquire land, all right, particularly in the city, because you're just having slums and squatters everywhere. You cannot do development. So by acquiring land, we had to clear the slums and squatters. But that cannot end the story, right? When you clear people, they have to live somewhere, and that's where the public housing program comes in. And people are actually better off being acquired and moved to much better premises, because at that time there's no electricity, no water, no sewage systems. So they were actually better off in the public housing towns. Now, once you have amalgamated the land, and through very good planning, you bring in the infrastructure, you can then sell the land and realize the value, right? So once you realize the value, money comes into the government, and you start this virtuous cycle of revenue that comes to the government, and then the land value increases because now you put in the infrastructure, development has taken place. Other developments, the land value will start to go up because then you see growth, particularly in the city. So to a certain extent, that's how it started, this cycle of growth. But the government, of course, didn't have much money. But you remember the Central Provident Fund? In a way, we funded ourselves because all of us had to also, although probably at the time salaries weren't very high, but the fact is that the government did manage to get money from people who work and contribute to the Central Provident Fund. So that also provided some fiscal space for such infrastructure. So you have to start that cycle, you see, of development. And then land values increase. So the cycle just keeps going. And that's how it was done.
Thank you so much. There's a theme of circularity in both the responses you had earlier as this was. We're unfortunately running out of time, but the good news is we're about to go to coffee, so hopefully you're around and we can ask you questions. We have a lot of questions to ask, so thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.